Every time there is a new gun, weapon balance patch, or some crazy damage glitch in Black Ops 6 Zombies, the first place people go to test how good these things are is Patient 13. This boss has kind of become the damage test guinea pig within the Zombies community, and it got me thinking, what if I tested every gun in the game against them? So that's what I did. Now, before we get into this, there are some ground rules that I set myself to keep things as balanced and as fair as I could between each weapon. And if you don't care about the rules, I'll leave chapters for each weapon class so you can just skip right ahead to the damage testing, but I recommend you stick around anyway. Firstly, I will be placing every gun into a tier list ranking from F being the worst through D, C, B, A, and S, with S being the best. Each gun will be judged on 3 main parameters: damage output to the boss, how well the weapon deals with zombies during those little damage checkpoints, and the overall time it takes to beat the boss fight. Secondly, augments. I used the same augments on everything across all of the runs. This mainly affected perks like Elemental Pop, Deadshot, and Double Tap, as each of those perks have multiple augments that can alter damage outputs. But I ultimately went with Vulnerabine on Elemental Pop, Dead First on Deadshot, Double Time, and Double Standard on Double Tap. Every other perk doesn't really matter, to be honest, so we're not going to bother going over those. Lastly, there is weapon builds. Attachments don't really do a whole lot when it comes to boss damage, but I know I'm going to be asked what weapons were running what, so basically, every weapon followed the same attachment path. Pick a sight of your choosing, it doesn't really matter. Suppressor, CHF or reinforced barrel, the reinforced was mainly for the snipers, Ranger grip, the largest magazine available, CQB grip, balanced stock, and finally rapid fire. I did use a few conversion kits throughout this, and I will point those out when we get to them. And the very final point, every gun will be using the dead wire ammo mod. It's needed for the Wonder Weapon quest, so I just kept it on. Plus, there are several smaller phases throughout the fight where a multitude of ammo mods can greatly increase your damage. Deadwire is already equipped, so we might as well utilize it. Alright, that's everything we need to cover, so let's start off with the assault rifles. And the first weapon we'll be looking at is none other than the XM4. I'm not gonna lie, it's good. In fact, all of the assault rifles are good, but some are better than others, and the M4 certainly sits near the top of the list. Our damage ranges from 496 on non-crits to 1364 with crits, and being able to fire 21 bullets in a second thanks to double tap on our augments, we get a DPS of 28,644, which is pretty damn good considering we then have a 200 round magazine to back us up, allowing you to pump damage into the boss without really needing to think. The XM4 also cleans house during those zombie phases, even obliterating amalgams, giving you a very strong weapon overall. But where it gets really stupid is during the dead wire weakness phase of the fight. This first happens in the second phase, and it sees our damage more than double to 2976. And once again, thanks to double tap, this gives us a DPS of 69,496. All of this allows us to beat the boss in 5 minutes flat, earning the M4 a very respectful B tier ranking. The AK-74 is up next, and funnily enough, our regular damage output is exactly the same between the M4 and the AK. The only thing that separates the two is the AK's slightly lower fire rate, as it does only output 17 rounds a second, giving us a DPS of 23,188, which is still pretty good. The AK does also have some of the most aggressive recoil in its class, which can and will play a role in the amount of damage you can output. This does also make the checkpoint phase a little harder, however, hit your shots and it will also clean house. During the deadwire phase, the AK's damage is boosted to 3472, which sounds great, but it does only boost our DPS to 59,024. With a bit of luck getting a second deadwire phase during the final stage of the fight, we managed to clean up the boss fight in 5 minutes 24 seconds, placing the AK in B tier. The Ames is the first weapon on this list, where the damage fluctuates pretty heavily as it doesn't have the greatest range, with body damage from 384 to 400 and crit damage from 1056 to 1100, and assuming you hit all crits, your DPS will range from 21,120 to 22,000, which is surprising considering the fire rate on the Ames is only marginally slower than the M4. Once again though, the Ames bully zombies of all kinds during checkpoints, so no worries there. With our deadwire damage boost, we see our DPS jump to 56,000, which again is lower than the previous weapons, but it doesn't stop the aims clocking in a time of 5 minutes 20 seconds, slightly beating out the AK, but still landing it in B tier. Now this is where we have the first real surprise of the run, the GPR. Straight up, this gun clocked a time of 4 minutes and 24 seconds. I had no idea the GPR had it like that. Our damage with the GPR is 528 to 544 when hitting non-crits, and for crits we're looking at 1452 to 1496, meaning our DPS is 29,040 to 29,920. So yeah, this thing's hitting pretty damn hard. You already know the drill by now as well. Zombies just kind of fall over when they see this thing. Even the amalgam gets nuked by it. So those checkpoints are nothing to worry about with this thing. And it only gets better. With Deadwire, the GPR is putting out over 72,000 DPS during the second and final phase. Put all this together, and we have our first low S to potentially high A tier gun. The Goblin Mark II, apart from its objectively hilarious name, the Goblin really hasn't been that special in BO6 Zombies until recently. You see, the Goblin now has itself a conversion kit called the Mini Rocket, allowing the Goblin to fire high explosive rounds, and oh boy, they're pretty damn good in zombies. Shooting Patient 13 in the body with this attachment gives you 2400 damage, while seeing crits hit for 2805, giving us a max DPS of 30,855, which is not too bad at all. With the rounds being explosive, it is also extra good at killing zombies, which is very nice. Unfortunately, the Goblin doesn't get the best experience during the Deadwire weakness phase. Hitting body shots here gives us a DPS of 39,270, while hitting crits gets the DPS of 64,790. But those crit spots have limited health, and destroying both of them does remove the Deadwire weakness phase without actually ending the whole phase, meaning hitting those less potent shots is the best route to getting through this fight as quick as possible. But with all that said and done, the Goblin did still manage to put up a time of 4 minutes and 52 seconds, placing it in the A tier. The Model L is possibly the most boring assault rifle in the game, but it's good. So what more do you really want? Our DPS is looking like 21,120 with the Model L. That does make these opening few minutes of the fight pretty easy, and you already know the drill when it comes to murdering zombies. Like, God, it's so great just having double tap in this game, making just every gun good. Anyway, before we get too distracted, the Model L continues to be a pretty good gun for the remainder of the fight, putting down amalgams with ease and also seeing its DPS boosted to 53,760 during the Deadwire phase of this fight. And in conclusion, the Model L is another A tier weapon, putting in a time of 4 minutes and 48 seconds. I hope you're starting to see the theme here with these assault rifles. Moving on to the last of the base game assault rifles, and one of my personal favorites, we have the AS Val. The level 55 unlock, funnily enough, comes in with the joint lowest bullet for bullet damage, with our crit damage maxing out at 1100, with the aims being its weakling counterpart. But thanks to the Val's extremely high fire rate and pairing with double tap, we still get 25,300 DPS out of the assault rifle. The Val's lower damage paired with some heavy recoil thanks to the gun's extreme fire rate does mean it's not as good as its fellow ARs at taking out zombies, but that doesn't mean it's bad, it's just a little harder to hit your shots, as it will still clean up nice when you start popping those heads. And the amalgams also don't stand much of a chance thanks to double standard doing its thing. And you know it doesn't mess around when it comes to our Deadwire weakness phase. The max damage here for the Val is 2,800, giving us a DPS of 64,400, but I was actually hitting on the lower end of the gun's damage here thanks to the range being pretty mediocre. Our damage was 2352, giving us a DPS of just above 54,000. The extra 10k damage here would have been nice, but as you can see from Patient 13's health, it doesn't really matter anyway, as he just gets melted by the Val. The Val's final time was 5 minutes and 15 seconds, but that was inflated a tad thanks to my own mistakes like sliding off the platform 10 seconds into the fight, but I'm not going to let that affect the Val's final ranking, as it still gets to sit at the big boy table with the rest of the tier A's. The first of our DLC assault rifles is up next, the Cypher. and the Cypher is kinda mid. Crit damage is a decent size at 1320, which you're about to become real familiar with as we go through the rest of these ARs. And with the Cypher's rate of fire, we see a DPS total of 19,800, which is the lowest out of all of the assault rifles. Now don't get me wrong, it will still do a job against Patient 13 and the zombies in the arena, it's just lacking any real wow factor. The Cypher's DPS sits a little higher than 50,000 during our Deadwire phase, and honestly, I did feel a little underwhelmed by it. But the Cypher still clocked in with a time of 5 minutes and 49 seconds, putting the Cypher into a low B, high C tier. The Krig C, possibly one of my all-time favorites when it comes to ARs in zombies, and I'm pleased to announce it doesn't suck in the Patient 13 boss fight. Our crit damage comes in at 1320, and thanks to the Krig's higher fire rate, our DPS is 22,440. But the Krig's lack of recoil and the 141 round magazine after pack punch makes dealing damage a breeze, allowing you to cut down Patient 13's health very quickly in the opening stages of this fight. And yes, zombies also don't stand much of a chance against this gun too. The Krig once again matches the Cypher's damage in our Deadwire weakness phase, and once again our increased fire rate sees our DPS looking a bit better, coming in at 57,120. All this rolled into the Krig C package makes our final time 4 minutes and 55 seconds, seeing it at home where it belongs in the A tier. Honestly, I cannot wait to tell you just how good this next gun is, and that gun is the Kilo 141. The Kilo was primarily brought back as a part of Season 3's nostalgia bait, Verdansk Warzone, where it is in fact not Warzone where the Kilo shines. That, my friends, belongs to zombies. The Kilo basically gets the best of all worlds in zombies. Incredible fire rate when paired with double tap, being able to shoot 20 bullets a second. A 200 round magazine to shoot all those bullets out of. Zero recoil, so all those bullets will find their intended target, and a damage crit of 1408. To top it all off, giving us a DPS of 28,160, and it's just an all-round incredible zombie slayer. And it gets better. Our Deadwire phase sees the Kilo's damage bumped all the way up to 3584, which equals 71,680 DPS, and it feels like it. Let me tell you, this gun is pretty damn good. So good, in fact, it clocked in a time of 4 minutes and 3 seconds. And you know what? That's going to make it our very first S tier gun of the video. The CR56 AMAX rounds out the assault rifles, and I'm glad to say we're ending this section on a high note. Yet again, the AMAX returns to Call of Duty thanks to Warzone, and yet again it shines in zombies. Now the AMAX does have itself a conversion kit that has become pretty popular amongst zombie players, but I opted not to use it here as I feel it's a better zombie slayer opposed to boss killer, but that's just me. Instead, we have ourselves an AMAX with a 120 round magazine where each bullet hits for 1320 on crit, giving us a DPS of 22,440. And if that number sounds familiar, it's because the AMAX and the Krig share the exact damage output. It's actually kind of uncanny, but they're basically the same gun. Now, they may be very similar all the way down to the damage, but we did clear Patient 13 16 seconds quicker with the AMAX than we did the Krig, totaling a time of 4 minutes 39 seconds, placing it amongst the rest of its Tier A assault rifle counterparts. We may be done with assault rifles, but there are still many more weapons to come as we step into the world of SMGs, and starting us off, we have the C9. The C9 is another one of those guns that's got itself a conversion kit, and this time it's in use. The C9 10mm ammo conversion does see a few negative effects, such as the magazine capacity being hard capped to 30 rounds, but that does thankfully get bumped to 60 rounds thanks to Pack-a-Punch, and the recoil is increased and the fire rate is reduced. But it does see the damage increase, and you can boost the fire rate with double tap, and all of this allows the C9 to hit for a maximum of 1364 damage to the crit, putting in an overall DPS of 27,280. And considering you can empty the 60 round mag in 3 seconds flat, That's a lot of damage. During the dead wire weakness phase, things only get crazier as our DPS is 69,440 and the C9 just mows through Patient 13's health bar at this point. Zombies also don't stand any chance against the C9, including amalgams that just get deleted by this gun. Coming in with a final time of 4 minutes and 29 seconds, the C9 earns its place in the top half of the A tier. The Tanto 22 since launch has been one of the favorites amongst zombie players, so surely it's gonna be good in the Patient 13 boss fights. Yeah, not really. The Tanto excels at zombie slaying with its slower fire rate but high damage output. In fact, for damage against regular zombies, it is best in class, so it does well in the checkpoint phases of the fight. Its damage output against Patient 13 isn't even that bad, clocking in a DPS of 23,936, and it's backed up with a 75 round mag, which is actually pretty decent. But for some reason, in practice, it's just really not that good. Now, it does make up ground during the dead wire phase of the fight as it puts up a little under 61,000 DPS, and it tore through this phase. But it wasn't enough for me to change my mind on what I'd already seen, especially considering the 6-minute 22-second runtime, making this our first C tier of the video. The Jackal PDW isn't a gun that gets much game time from myself, so going into this run I didn't really know what to expect, but I will say I was pleasantly surprised. The damage isn't anything to write about, averaging anywhere from 968 to 1188, giving us a DPS range of 20,328 to 24,948. And you're going to be seeing a lot more of the former here because the Jackal's range sucks. This would probably be fixed by changing out a few attachments such as the long barrel over the CHF, but I'm a man stuck in my ways, so leave me be. That being said, the Jackal still puts in a decent shift during this fight. It may not hit hard, but it hits fast and a lot thanks to its 100 round mag. Just make sure you enter this fight with plenty of points, or vote trade and just any other ways to get ammo back easily, because you're going to go through a lot of it. The zombies in this arena don't stand much of a chance, and once the dead wire weakness phase rolls around, neither does Patient 13, as the Jackal's DPS shoots up to 63,504, and it makes light work of the boss. The small rapid fire package walks away with a final time of 5 minutes, 7 seconds, and a B tier ranking. The infamous PP Bison, otherwise known as the PP919 in Black Ops 6 Zombies, is a lot more than just a small package to make crude jokes about, as this PP has quite a lot to give. The PP comes into this fight hitting harder than most of its SMG counterparts with a maximum crit damage of 1628. That results in a DPS of 27,676. But the best part about the PP is its enormous magazine. You see, Black Ops 6 Zombies offers up some pretty unique pack-a-punch abilities to a handful of weapons across the game, and the 919 was lucky enough to be a reciprocate of one of these boosts, receiving a 340 capacity magazine, which doesn't sound that fantastic, I know, but it does allow you to hold down the trigger for basically as long as you want, which means you can deal some crazy sustained damage to Patient 13, making this boss fight way easier than normal. Not to mention, we get a staggering increase to our DPS during the dead wire phase, up to 70,000. So yeah, the Bison is just like the best SMG in the game. So much so that it clocked in a time of 4 minutes 21 seconds, making it another low S to very high A tier gun. The Compact 92 is one of those guns that I just don't think anyone really cares about, like in the nicest possible way. A filler gun, if you will, but it's actually not that bad. Your bullet for bullet damage is certainly on the low end with the Compact, as its maximum damage you'll only be seeing 880 per crit shot, but thanks to the Compact's range you'll probably be seeing more closer to 748, giving us a DPS range of 21,692 to 25,520, which again isn't actually that bad. The Compact also has its own little pack-a-punch gimmick as it receives greatly increased hipfire, which can come in handy if you're accurate, and as you can see, the Compact has no issues when it comes to dealing with zombies. During our dead wire phase, the Compact's DPS is 55,216, and considering it's not the strongest weapon in its class, it does have some give. So much so that it comes in with a 5 minutes 31 second time and a respectable B tier ranking. I am not the biggest fan of the KSV. I know that might rustle a few jimmies, but it's really not my favorite gun to use. I don't know why, but I just know I don't have a fun time with it. And I know I definitely didn't have a fun time with it in this boss fight. But I kind of respect it because it's pretty good. The KSV is another one of those low damage, ridiculous fire rate SMGs that puts up some alright DPS. That DPS being 16,500 to 23,100. And I know you might hear 16,500 DPS and think that isn't good after all, but I still managed to put up a 4 minutes 59 seconds run with it. This was achieved by making the most out of the 58,800 DPS phase during the dead wire part of the fight, and the KSV just pumps damage into the boss here. So overall, it's not really a bad gun. B tier. You know, I had really high hopes for this next gun. The SOG. This has been a go-to for me ever since it dropped, and unfortunately, it just doesn't really cut it in the boss fight. Once again, high fire rate paired with low damage, and the DPS results are 15,840 on the low end and 22,176 on the high end. The only issue is to get that DPS, you've got to be real up close and personal with Patient 13, which, let's be honest, not the best idea. Plus, the SOG only gets a 91 round mag when pack-a-punch, and this thing is spitting out bullets for fun, so you better make sure you've got a reliable way to get ammo back or just have a ton of points during this fight. The SOG does win back a few points during the dead wire phase, which DPS is bumped to 48,000 flat, and you can see some serious damage output here. Plus, it is also good at taking out zombies no problems, but in the end, the SOG closes out its run with a 5 minutes 58 seconds time, landing it in C tier. The PPS recently returned to zombies with Black Ops 6, and I was not excited for this run, because I have already done some boss fights with the PPSH. Admittedly, this was before double tap, but it still sucked, because the PPSH sucks. But does it suck in a post double tap world? Not as much, which does make me pleased. The PPSH's max damage output is 968, that totals 24,200 DPS, and yet again the range stinks, so you're more likely going to be seeing a lower DPS output being 20,900, which is still alright. The PPSH does come with a ton of ammo and a nicely sized 101 round magazine, meaning you have plenty of bullets to deal with the boss and zombies. Speaking of zombies, the PPSH does a good enough job dealing with them too. When the dead wire phase comes around, you'll be dealing 53,200 DPS, and the PPSH certainly does go bare during this phase, making these final moments much quicker and easier. The PPSH clocks in a time of 5 minutes 28 seconds, securing a place in B tier. Last of the SMGs, we have the Lauda. There is no easy way to say this, so I'm just gonna say it. The Lauda sucks. It is truly awful. I don't understand how they made this gun as weak as they have. The running theme with SMGs is high fire rate, low damage. Fine. Now the Lauda just so happens to be the fastest firing of all the SMGs, and therefore the weakest per shot, with your maximum crit damage being 836. Now the Lauda can fire 31 bullets a second with double tap, totaling a DPS of 25,916, which isn't even that bad. But I'm telling you right now, this gun does not output that damage. I don't know what's going on with it, but those numbers are a lie, because this thing is just tickling everything it hits. Even during the dead wire phase where we get 55,552 DPS, it's just underwhelming. But the worst part is, it took me 7 minutes 21 seconds to get through this fight, becoming our first D tier along the way. And pretty deservedly so, if you ask me. From pea shooters to big blasters, it's time to look at how well our shotguns perform against Patient 13. The Marine SP is up first, and this was surprising in a good way. If you are perfect with your timing, you can fire 3 rounds a second, which I know doesn't sound too impressive, but each of these rounds fire 8 pellets that can all connect with the boss, and the maximum damage per pellet is 2,244, giving you a max DPS of 53,856. To consistently achieve this damage, you'd need to ADS with the shotgun. I made the mistake of hip firing for like 90% of this fight, and my damage was all over the place. ADSing just means a tighter pellet spread, which means more damage. It's pretty simple, I just made a mistake. Of course, with the Marine being a shotgun, you just know it was good at dealing with zombies, and amalgams are nothing to this thing as well. Our dead wire phase damage was again a little all over the place, but the highest damage I saw was 5,712 per pellet, giving us a DPS of 137,088. So yeah, the Marine is hitting very hard during this part of the fight. The final phase came and went, and the Marine walked away with a time of 3 minutes and 55 seconds, putting it at the top of S tier. The ASG is arguably the most popular gun amongst zombie players in Black Ops 6, and I get it, the ASG is pretty damn good. It was good before double tap, and it's even better post double tap. However, the ASG does kind of suffer due to its own success. You see, it's a semi-automatic gun with a 40 round mag when packer punched, and I guess that just means it's not allowed to have as much damage as the other two shotguns, even though the ASG's max crit damage is 880 per pellet, meaning per round you'll be dealing 7,040 damage. That equals 42,240 DPS. Like, it's not low damage, but compared to the other shotguns, it kind of is. The ASG is a powerhouse though, especially against regular zombies, and of course it'll do a job against the amalgams too. The ASG really shines in the dead wire weakness phase of the fight. Our DPS is increased to a maximum of 107,520, and it cruises through this section of the fight. We finished up the fight with a final time of 4 minutes and 7 seconds, earning an A tier rating, but I wouldn't argue if you wanted to put it into S either. Now the real star when it comes to shotguns is the Maelstrom, which is hilarious considering this was by far one of the worst guns in the game when it first released. But thanks to a recent buff and the reintroduction of double tap, the Maelstrom has become one of the best guns in the game. The Maelstrom's max DPS is 97,152, which is ridiculous. Pairing that with a 28 round mag, low recoil and decent range, and an absurd fire rate makes the Maelstrom just nuts. The Maelstrom doesn't even really need to try during this fight either, to be honest. Just point it in any direction, pull the trigger and watch everything fall over. And that's not even the best bit. With Deadwire during that phase, your DPS goes up to a maximum of 247,296. Like, it's genuinely laughable at how good this gun is. All of this made for a 3 minutes 7 seconds run, and you know what? That gets the Maelstrom its own little spot all the way at the tippy top. At least for now, anyway. LMGs, love them or hate them, they're up next, and we're starting with the XMG. The XMG is quite literally the M4's big brother. The LMG comes with a magazine capacity of 400 when packer punched, and to pair with that, the XMG outputs 1,276 damage when hitting those crits, and the high fire rate means we're getting 24,244 DPS. And that 400 round mag goes a very long way with damage numbers like those. And those damage numbers only get better once we head into the Deadwire phase of this fight, getting 61,712 DPS. And honestly, the XMG is just an overall tank of a gun. Great damage against the boss, great at taking out all kinds of zombies, and you have all the bullets in the world. Yes, it is heavy like all the other SMGs, and you do move slower, but just use PhD slider and you'll never have a problem. 4 minutes 15 seconds was our final time with the XMG, earning it a place in the A tier. The PU-21, this gun is pretty damn fun to use, mainly because it's an LMG with the fire rate of something like the Sorg, and it makes me smile. Speaking of the fire rates, the PU-21 spits out 21 bullets a second with double tap, which is absurd for an LMG, and with a damage of 1188, we're getting a total DPS of 24,948. Now you're going to be reloading this thing a lot thanks to the fire rate, so just be wary of that. During the Deadwire phase, the PU's DPS is 63,504, which is very, very good for a gun that fires as quickly as this thing does. And again, zombies stand zero chance against the PU-21, making this a very strong option for Patient 13. We clocked in a final time of 4 minutes 55 seconds, and it gets a seat in the A tier. The GPMG. I don't really have much to say about this gun other than it's alright. Our crit damage is 1012, which is a little lower than I'd like for an LMG, but here we are. The GPMG's DPS is 22,264, which again is a little lower than I'd like. But the low damage isn't reciprocated when it comes to dealing with zombies, as the GPMG actually does a great job at dealing with all kinds of zombies, which is very nice. When it comes to boss damage, I am now starting to realize the GPMG is just an oversized SMG, as our DPS during the Deadwire weakness phase is 56,672. The low damage thankfully doesn't stop the GPMG from putting in an alright time of 5 minutes 9 seconds, and I think B tier is pretty suitable for this gun. The Feng is our final LMG. The Feng is a slower firing, harder hitting LMG, and it also has a slightly better mobility than the previous machine guns, almost assault rifle-esque, one might say. Our damage with the Feng is the highest per bullet in its class, with 1672 being our max crit damage. The thing is though, the Feng's fire rate really lets it down, as our DPS comes in at 21,736, which is quite underwhelming. The Feng is also only okay at killing zombies. It will take them down quickly, but sadly not as quick as a lot of the other options in this game. When Deadwire is doing its thing, our DPS goes up to 55,328, and it does finally feel like the Feng is living up to its LMG class name. And even though the Feng didn't exactly feel that great throughout this fight, it still managed to get through this in 4 minutes 56 seconds, but I still think I'm going to put it in B tier. The LR762 starts off this next class of guns, and the sniper is one of the more unique weapons in the game, as this receives one of those pack-a-punch abilities, and for the LR it's explosive rounds, and these rounds hit hard. We're talking of 8,500 damage to non-crits, and crits are seeing 12,715 damage. Now the LR is a bolt action, and unfortunately it is rather slow. However, if your timing is perfect, you can fire 2 shots a second, giving you big damage. But then again, it is a sniper at the end of the day, so you also have to be crazy accurate with it. And if you can juggle all of this, you do get a very strong weapon that is capable of destroying the boss, zombies, and amalgams with ease. The LR doesn't see a damage boost during the Deadwire weakness phase either, which is unfortunate. All of this led to a 5 minutes 25 seconds run, and honestly I'm thinking B tier for this one. I am not an enjoyer of the SVD/Dragunov in literally any video game, except this one. This mainly comes down to the fact that the SVD also receives itself a little pack-a-punch ability, in this case being turned into a shotgun, firing 3 rounds in either a horizontal or vertical line when hip-fired, or 3 tightly grouped together shots while aiming, and it is very good. Each individual bullet deals 3,178 damage when hitting those crits, meaning each shot deals 9,534 damage, and with that we get a DPS of 28,602. I wish I could say our damage only gets better with the Deadwire phase, but unfortunately it doesn't. Yet again, we get no increase in damage for that section of the fight. Deadwire does, however, allow us to destroy amalgams and other zombies, so there's the plus there at least. The SVD clocks in a final time of 4 minutes 53 seconds, and I'm thinking like a low A, high B here for this one. The LW3A1 Frostline. This was one of my biggest disappointments of this entire project. I was fully expecting the rapid-fire, hard-hitting sniper that it is against zombies, specials, and elites to show up for this fight. And it does against those enemies, but it's so bad against the boss. Your max damage is 5,086 per shot. That's it. And if you miss a crit, you're hitting for 3,168 damage a shot. This gun is so good in one section of the game and yet so poor in another, and it actually makes me a little sad that it's our first F tier, as it comes in with a final time of 9 minutes and 1 second. The AMR Mod 4, aka the Barrett 50 Cal. The AMR is an absolute machine when it comes to dealing with zombies, manglers, amalgams. You name it, the AMR is gonna destroy it. Unless it's called Patient 13. It just sucks against this guy. Our damage is capped just like the Frostline, but unlike the Frostline, the AMR doesn't get any bonus damage for crit shots. It's just the same damage all fight long, and that damage is 3,178 per shot. The only thing the AMR has going for it is the fact it's semi-automatic, so you can get those shots out relatively quickly, and it has a 16-round mag when pack-a-punched. In the end, we finished with 6 minutes 23 seconds, and the AMR is placed into the C tier. Oh boy, the HDR is up next, and rounds out the snipers. The HDR is not good for this fight. The damage the HDR outputs is not bad, being 9,644 to the crit, but that doesn't make it good in this fight. I made it through 48 out of 49 runs of this Easter egg without dying once. Took a couple of downs here and there, I will admit, but I only fully died in one run, and it was with the HDR in the boss fight. Now you can scream and shout skill issue all you want, but it's no coincidence that out of 49 guns, this is the one I died with. I'm just putting it out there. Obviously, I ran it back a second time and beat the boss, but man, I did not enjoy my time with this gun. It's not that great against the boss, although it does deal over 23,000 damage per shot during the deadwire phase, and you can 2-tap amalgams if you can aim. But that doesn't mean it's good. It just doesn't. It's just not. I don't like it. Anyway, 6 minutes 34 seconds was the final time on the run. We didn't die, but due to that death, I gotta knock a couple points off. D tier. From one class full of disappointments to one full of surprises, we have the Marksman Rifles, and first in the spotlight is the DM10. And let me learn you real quick. If you haven't used this gun since Double Tap dropped, you're doing yourself a disservice because this thing is incredible. Our max crit damage with this gun is 4,972. What makes this gun is its rate of fire. You see, the DM10 is one of those guns with a special pap ability. This one's being you fire 2 bullets per trigger pull. So when you pull the trigger, the gun fires, and when you let go of the trigger, it fires again. And with double tap, you can spam the hell out of this, essentially making the DM10 fully automatic, which in turn gives us a DPS of 39,776. But it gets so much better. You see, during the deadwire phase, the DM10's damage is boosted to a staggering 12,656, giving us a DPS of 101,248, and Patient 13's health just disappears. The DM10 also cruises through any and every zombie, so no issues there, and all this wrapped up into one package gives us a final time of 3 minutes and 51 seconds, earning the DM10 a spot amongst the elite in S tier. The AEK 971, typically a 3-round burst gun, but in Black Ops 6 it has itself a conversion kit to make it fully automatic. The conversion does remove a small amount of the gun's overall damage, but I thought it was worth it considering the huge fire rate increase. The AEK's damage is 1012 to the crit spot, and we can get a little over 22,000 DPS out of it. The max size is only 67 with the conversion, and you will go through all of your ammo quickly, so make sure you've got points to spend. 2,576 is the damage the AEK can output per shot during the deadwire weakness phase, and we get a DPS of 56,672, which is not too bad. The AEK is also a pretty solid weapon when it comes to dealing with all types of zombies, which is also nice. 4 minutes 51 seconds was the time for the AEK, making it another low A to high B tier option. There's another conversion kit in town for the Marksman Rifles, and this time it's for the SWAT 556. The infamous Grau assault rifle makes its return via conversion kit, and it's kinda mid. I never tested out the 3-burst version of the SWAT, so maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, I don't really know. But I did think the Grau conversion would make the SWAT a viable option for this fight, and I mean, it is, but there's like way better options too. Our crit damage is 1056, and thanks to the SWAT's moderate fire rate, we get a DPS of 19,008, which is pretty low for a gun of its caliber. The Grau 75 round mag and large reserves and slow fire rate paired with Vulture Rage should give you more than enough ammo to get through this fight without needing to worry too much about buying bullets. The Grau's lackluster damage against Patient 13 isn't replicated against zombies, thankfully, as the Grau is quite competent in this department. Our damage during the deadwire weakness also isn't pretty great, and it has our DPS looking like 48,384. And in practice, it's certainly not the worst, but it could be way better. The Grau completes its run in 6 minutes 18 seconds, getting a place in the low B, possibly high C tier. Have any of you actually used the Sarkov in-game? Because I hadn't. This was straight up the very first time I'd ever used the Sarkov, and it's probably going to be the last. It's semi-automatic, fires pretty slow, and doesn't even put out that much damage. That damage being 3,300 to the crit, which might sound great, but again, this thing fires so slowly. So slowly that our DPS is 13,200. Yeah. Now I will admit I didn't have rapid fire on the gun, but I honestly don't think it'd do that much to help this thing, because I don't even think double tap did anything, and I know it's semi-automatic, not full auto, but even then double tap usually removes any firing delay on semi-autos, but not on the Sarkov apparently. The damage does increase by more than double to 8,400 during the deadwire weakness phase, but even that isn't enough to help this thing that much. I mean, luckily it does an alright job at killing zombies, but even that could be debated. In the end, the Sarkov clocked in a 6 minute 15 second run, but it's not earning anything higher than a C tier. The TR2, aka the FAL, rounds out the Marksman Rifles, and I was dreading this run, because when the TR2 first released, I attempted to get to round 50 with it, and it was miserable. I was fully expecting for this to also be a very miserable experience, but it wasn't. The TR2 goes from single fire to burst fire with pack a punch, and pre-double tap this is an awful change, but with the double tap it does actually make the TR2 way better. Crit damage is 1936 and we get a DPS of 17,424, which doesn't sound like a lot, but pair that with the TR2's 80 round mag, it does go a long way. The TR2 is also very good at dealing with zombies throughout the boss fight, including manglers and amalgams. With Deadwire equipped, our damage increases to 4,928 and we get a DPS of 44,352 during the Deadwire phase. All of this allows the TR2 to beat the boss fight in 5 minutes 27 seconds, earning it a respectable B tier. As of recording this, there are 4 pistols in Black Ops 6 Zombies. 2 of them are alright and 2 of them are not very good, and we're starting with one of the bad ones, the PM 9mm, otherwise known as the Makarov. Again, this is one of those guns I just haven't used much, so I didn't really have the best attachments unlocked, but to be honest, the attachments won't save this thing. Our damage comes in at 1496, but the pistol's fire rate is less than good, so we can only get 13,464 DPS out of it, and not to forget, we only have a 24 bullet magazine. Not only is it not great against the boss, it's also not that good against zombies, especially if they are armored, manglers, or amalgams, all of which you fight a ton of during this boss fight. You do see a decent jump in damage during the Deadwire phase to 3248, but it still sucks. 29,000 DPS really isn't it for the big damage section of this fight. All in all, the PM came in with a time of 8 minutes 1 seconds. So yeah, don't use this, F tier. If you think the PM is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Let me introduce you to the Strider 22. Now, I have already beaten Patient 13 with the Strider 22 before. I did it shortly after Black Ops 6 launched, and it sucked. Well, guess what? 7 months later, it's still just as bad. Our damage output with the Strider is 1144 to the crit, giving us a DPS of 10,296, making it the weakest gun in the game. And it doesn't get better. The Strider, much like the PM, also sucks at dealing with zombies, and it doesn't get any major damage boost during the Deadwire phase of the fight. The Strider is just all around ass. We clocked in a final time of 10 minutes 20 seconds, and this will be the final time I ever use that weapon. F tier. No, bottom of F tier. We've gotten the 2 stinker pistols out of the way, so now we can focus on the 2 alright ones, and the first one of those is going to be the Grekova. This pistol is actually quite cool, one reason being it's fully automatic, the other being when equipped with the largest mag and pack-a-punch you get 180 bullets per magazine, and it is great. It does unfortunately come with some drawbacks, mainly the damage department, as its max damage is 748, and we get a DPS of 14,212, which is low, but that mag size does make up for it. The Grekova, despite its low damage, does still do a good job at taking down zombies too. Amalgams will take a few more bullets than you'd like, but it'll still get the job done. Our DPS is increased to 36,176 with Deadwire, and it does a great job during this phase of the fight, which is great. You can actually get your DPS up to 42,000 during this phase, but you've got to be real up close and personal with the Grekova, which, again, I don't recommend. Overall, it's a decent gun, putting in a time of 6 minutes flat and earning a low B to high C rating. Finally, we have the GS45, which needs no introduction as it is Black Ops 6's iteration of Mustang and Sally, and it lives up to the title pretty well. Your damage is looking pretty good with the GS, putting in 3,408 damage per shot. With Akimbo, our DPS is sitting a little over 20,000, which isn't bad. Unfortunately, the GS doesn't receive any damage boost during the Deadwire phase, which is sad, but it doesn't really hinder the weapon too much. And with it being Mustang and Sally, you already know it's good against regular zombies and specials and elites alike. 5 minutes 28 seconds was the time on the clock when Patient 13 went down, making this a solid B tier weapon. There is one launcher worth using in Black Ops 6 Zombies, and it is the Sigma. I was not expecting good things from either launcher heading into this class, but I was pleasantly surprised by the Sigma. It receives 3 rounds per magazine after Pack-a-Punch, and each one of those rockets deals 17,808 damage. But the best thing about this is you can spam fire the hell out of this weapon and therefore pump damage into Patient 13. Unlike a lot of explosive or already very powerful weapons, the Sigma does actually gain bonus damage during the dead wire phase of the fight, increasing to 27,270. Now, it is worth keeping in mind you only get 15 rockets, so it's worth heading into this fight with plenty of spare points. One of the cool things about the Sigma is if you can hit amalgams in the crit spots, you will deal crit damage opposed to regular explosive damage, allowing you to take them down very quickly. Overall, the Sigma is great and clocked in a time of 4 minutes 28 seconds, earning a very surprising seat amongst the A tier. That leaves us with the other launcher, the one that is not so worth using, the HE1. It's not even that bad, to be honest. If you can hit your crit shots on the boss, the launcher will deal 27,270 damage per shot, which is good. The only issue here is the HE1 only fires 1 rocket before needing to reload, whereas the Sigma can fire 3 before needing to reload. And this makes it so beating the boss takes forever, and by forever I mean 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Yeah, there isn't really much to say about the HE1 other than it's a D tier weapon. We have made it into the final 2 weapon classes, Wonder Weapons and Specials, and I think we'll start with the latter. The first weapon in this class is the Siren, a slow firing, harder hitting SMG style weapon. I was skeptical of the Siren going into this, but honestly, it's not half bad. With double tap, the fire rate is more than enough, and it's packing some pretty good damage, hitting crits for 1408, giving us a DPS of 23,936, which again, not bad at all. The Siren can also do a job when it comes to dealing with zombies, manglers, and amalgams. A little slower on the amalgams, but it's still decent nonetheless. With Deadwire, our damage spikes to 3584 and totals just under 61,000 DPS, which is pretty good. Again, this thing's actually not that bad. In total, the Siren is a good zombie slayer and a decent boss killer, clocking in time of 4 minutes 52 seconds, winning a spot amongst the A tier. The D13 sector is another one of those weapons that I have already done boss runs with, and it sucked. But when I did those boss runs, I used the explosive blades, which are a huge hindrance to this weapon's boss damage. But fellow creator Donuts put me onto the base blades, and holy hell, what a change these things made. Our damage to the boss's crit is 39,600, which is crazy in itself. But then you remember the D13 comes with a 15 round mag, and if you are perfect with your timing, you can fire 2 of these blades of destruction every second. And it gets better. That is right, the D13 gets extra damage during the Deadwire phase, hitting for a total of 83,160 to the crit and 50,400 to the body, which is crazy. And of course, the D13 is wild at killing all kinds of zombies. Just point, shoot, they all fall over. The D13 clocks in the second fastest time of the day with 3 minutes 16 seconds, earning its place right next to the Maelstrom at the tippy top of the tree. The final special weapon is none other than the nail gun. Anyone who played Cold War Zombies may be familiar with this weapon because it was pretty damn good in that game, and it's also pretty damn good in this game too. When pack-a-punch, you get a max size of 90, which is very nice. Your max crit damage is 1408, but you do have to be very close to the boss to utilize that damage, otherwise you're more than likely dealing 1056 damage per shot, resulting in 11,616 DPS, which doesn't sound like a lot, I know, but remember, 90 rounds of magazine, they go a long way here. The nail gun is also a viable option against zombies, no matter which kind. It can do the job against them all. During Deadwire, our DPS is just shy of 40,000 and it crushes Patient 13's health. The nail gun clocked in a time of 4 minutes 18 seconds, getting a spot in the higher parts of the A tier. Wonder Weapons, the best of the best, the absolute top tier weapons in the game. Yeah, that's what you'd think, right? No, they all suck in this fight, like really bad. There are only 3 wonder weapons available on Terminus, being the Ray Gun Mark 1 and Mark 2, and we also have the Terminus exclusive, the Beam Smasher. We'll start with the Mark 1 Ray Gun. Traditionally, the only way to get this gun is from the box, so it's already not the easiest weapon to get your hands on, but then you have the audacity to make its max damage output 3,656. Like, come on, the Mark 1 ray gun already has a bad rep, and this is not helping its cause. And it gets worse. During the Deadwire phase, you can only hit the crit spots because Patient 13's body is immune to the ray gun. And guess what? It's the same for all the wonder weapons. Like, why? At least the ray gun does get some extra fire rate from double tap, so it's not all bad, I suppose. The ray gun is good when it comes to dealing with zombies, which is nice, but that being the best attribute for the boss fight does not do it any favors. 8 minutes 19 seconds is the time it took to beat Patient 13 with the Mark 1 ray gun. F tier. The ray gun Mark 2 is only marginally better, which kind of pains me to say. Each round deals 2,227 damage, that's 6,681 damage per burst, which is not that great. Especially considering the Mark II has a total of 243 rounds, and you go through all of that ammo so quickly with the Mark II, and it costs 10,000 points to buy ammo with wonder weapons, remember? Not good. Deadwire, we get a tiny boost in damage that feels like it lasts no longer than 30 seconds, because once those crit spots are gone, there is no coming back, and then we're right back to just regular old plink plonk damage. We'll say though, Mark II versus zombies, Mark II wins that fight every time, which is nice. But again, that being the only positive in a boss fight is depressing. 7 minutes 37 seconds is what the Mark II clocked in. D tier. Can the Beam Smasher be the redemption that wonder weapons need? No. I wasn't joking when I said all of these suck, and in fact the Beam Smasher is the worst of them all. The only redeeming quality this gun has is the fact it's good against zombies, and way easier to obtain thanks to the quest, because it is god awful at dealing damage to the boss. It has a max damage of 990. Now yes, it does fire pretty quickly, but it only gets a DPS of 13,860. Like, it just sucks. It's so bad, like, I'm sorry, it's so bad. Another Deadwire phase rolls around, and another phase where the only place you can damage is the crit spots, making this fight last even longer, and in the end, the Beam Smasher killed Patient 13 in 9 minutes 11 seconds. God, this thing sucks. F tier. And there it is. All 49 guns in Black Ops 6 versus Patient 13. There is a lot of good guns for this fight, with a few very, very good guns. I'm looking at you, Maelstrom, D13, Kilo. God, I love that gun. Let me know down in the comments where some of your favorites rank, and I am sorry if some of your favorites are towards the bottom, but at least now you know where the good stuff is. And with that, my name has been Satch. If you have enjoyed, drop a like, other the good stuffs. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.